got a reasonable number of members of parliament. Now the only thing with her and her party, which is SWAPO, now SWAPO got about 51 members of parliament out of 104 members of parliament. That means that she does not have the on-right majority because she falls short by 3 members of parliament to have the majority in parliament. But at the same time, she won that election, and but her party, the SWAPO, lost 12 seats in the election, which means that they lost parliament to some extent, but won the national election. But the news is that she is the first female president of Namibia. Since independence. Of course, Namibia got its independence in 1990. So they think this is the 7th election that they're having, and they have a female president. Apparently, the incumbent president, Nangolo Mbumba, did not take part in the elections, in this particular election. I can see Ndugu Otuko is already online from Iganga. He will be talking to us shortly. Now, in Ghana, at the same time, we had the election which was held on December 7th, and from Ghana, we see that the president of Ghana, Akufo, did not take part in this election like in Namibia also, but because his 2 constitutional terms had expired. But we see now the ANDC of John Mahama. John Mahama is a former president, and he participated in this election and won the election against Bahumia. Now Bahumia was a candidate, but he had been a vice president under Akufo. So he was running for the first time for presidency, but he lost to the former president. Now, one thing I liked about the Ghanaians, and which is also the thing that we're talking about, the democratic developments that we're having in Africa, that we are used to these elections of violence. People get elected, and then we have people fighting, and we have people going to court. But Ghana is giving us a different perspective in this particular part of the world. And I think let's have that clip of that election in Ghana shortly, then we continue. As we go along with the program. But in the international news also, for people who are following the news, you may have realized that there is a problem already in the ruling class of the Koreans in the South Korea, where the president declared a martial law. And when he declared a martial law, because he wanted to have a crackdown on people, on the politicians and the other people in the community who he thought were being anti-government. If it were in African country, it would have been a lot of news. But Asia, of course, is not also one of the Western democracies. But that declaration alone, which was later on lifted by Parliament, has created a lot of chaos in that country, and demonstrations have been going on. They had a first impeachment session last week, which failed because the ruling party was able to gather the numbers, and they defeated it. But now there's going to be another vote tomorrow on Saturday, and all indicators are that the president of Korea will be impeached. Now, that happens, it will mean that the second president of Korea is being impeached after the first one was impeached on issues of misuse of power and corruption. So these are some of the things that we are likely to see. If we have our clip from the concession speech of the candidate of Ghana, we shall have it. If not, then we shall continue. At the same time, we have Ndugu Otuko, who is in Iganga. Ndugu Otuko, can you talk to us from Iganga?
For Yet again, another Pan-African Friday. It's refreshing to be always part of this program on UBC. And I think it is one of the most popular programs across Africa, because I have a friend recently who comes from Senegal, and he was explaining to me how he was following one of our conversations on UBC. And it was really feeling, it was a nice feeling for me to know that people beyond the boundaries of Uganda are following the conversations on our deliberations on UBC. Well, I think, Comrade Mututa, I do not know where to start from, but I think...
okay, to begin with, what are you doing in Iganga?
To begin with, we are in Iganga on the process of ensuring that NRM comes up with a proper and acceptable register that is digitalized for the purposes of carrying out elections in the coming year. So basically, previously, there were challenges, as you may be aware, arising from failure to have a register ready in time, most especially in the 2021 election. And this time, the party has decided to come early to ensure that they sort out the issue of the register. By the time elections come, the question of the register will be dealt with. So basically, we are doing that in the Busoga region to ensure that the correct data is captured, complaints which arise are attended to as early as possible. Okay. That's why I'm here, sir.
So we can now tell Ugandans, for those who are viewing us today, that the NRM register is going to be clear, and we may not have issues of more independents coming, because independents are a product of rigging and discontent in the elections.
I can confidently say that we are very hopeful as members of NRM that this time the question of the register will be dealt with. And now that by December, by the end of this month, the first draft of the register will be ready. Next year, there will be a display of the register so that those who have complaints can be captured or their complaints can be addressed at that point. So I'm very confident, Comrade Mututa, that in the coming elections, there will be fewer complaints. I cannot say it will be 100% acceptable. Of course, there will be variances, a few variances here and there, but I believe on a scale of 1 to 10, the NRM will be around 8–9% in terms of ensuring that we have a good register. So I'm very confident, as a person who is supervising Busoga, that the issue of the register will be dealt with.
Nduku Awich is in Gulu, and let's also hear what he's doing in Gulu. Nduku Awich, if you are hearing us from where you are, can you please talk to us? How is Gulu?
Gulu is very fine. Of course, I can hear you. Gulu is very fine and very surprising, because the city is the most planned city in Uganda.
Okay.
I don't know other cities in East Africa, but I think it's the most planned. I think it has now maybe over 50 streets, well planned, like coordinates, like the one we used to have in the mathematics books in primary.
Okay.
And I'm even so happy as a director in NRM that this development is in Gulu. Because if the development and the planning, the neatness, the cleanliness of Gulu was, say, in a place like Mbarara, I think it would have caused us NRM problems, because we would have a lot to explain. Some people will say, you know, it is in the backyard of NRM, that's why it is like this and then that. But I'm glad it is in Gulu. So it is well planned, it is neat, it is clean.
Okay.
It's like a coordinate, and it is big and it is peaceful.
Oh, that's great. So what are you doing in Gulu?
I'm doing the same thing my colleague, my comrade has just explained in Iganga. I'm the team leader of the Chole region NRM digitalization program, register program. I have 9 districts covering from Agago to Moya. The 9 districts, as you know, NRM, the smallest nucleus we have is the branch. A branch is a village. So I have all the registers from all the branches in 9 districts. I am camped in Gulu High School, and that's where I'm talking from, with 70 data entrants, each with a laptop. We're entering all the data for our party members who have registered, so that we have a soft copy, in a way that even if President Museveni wanted to talk to Okello Peter from Padre, who is NRM, he can click in the register and get Okello Peter with his telephone and ask.
Okay.
So we are not going to avoid the situation where, like in the last time when the party chairman in primary said, whoever fails is NRM, please go and line up. So now, even if you line up for an election in your branch, they'll say you have lined up, but what is your name? Are you on the register? So that you will be marked as you have come, you have lined up, and you are in the register. So we're trying to come up with a clean register. Remember that a definition of a member would be the proof in the legal definition is who appears in the register.
Okay.
Because you may find some people wanting to come to contest in our party primary, and yet the law says you must be a party member. So what is the proof of party membership? Appearance on the register.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing, and the work is going on well. I've finished Gulu district, I've finished Gulu city, I've finished Noya, I'm finishing Amoro now. We are moving on well.
Okay. Now, why now? One can ask, why are you doing it now? As NRM.
Why we are doing it now, there could be not maybe only one reason, but many. One, we have a cycle of election, as you know. The Constitution of Uganda provides every 5 years you have election. So there's an election commission have come up with a roadmap. That is the Independent National Election Commission. So we have to fit in the system. Our roadmap as a party has to fit into the system, the roadmap of the national election. So therefore, we have activities that we have to do before the National Election Commission timetable. And those activities in the party cannot be done without a register. Like, for example, one big activity is that we need to have a national conference. Which national conference should hand over a flag to our national flag bearer, which, for example, we have been doing to President Museveni. So you need to elect those structures. How are you going to elect those structures? You need a register.
Okay.
But also at some point, so for us to have a President Museveni have a flag as our flag bearer, we need structures, a national conference. That national conference structure has to be elected. They can only be elected with a clean register. The other one is our other flag bearers from LC 1, 2, 3 up to Parliament LC 5. Those also need flags. So who elects? The people, the members. And who are the members? Those in the register.
Okay.
So there are many reasons that one, and of course we need to organize ourselves and have our records, even if there was no election. As a party, we know we are a mass party, but even this mass party, we should know how. We should be organized. No amount of massness can remove us from being organized and knowing membership.
We are looking at multi-party dispensation on this continent of Africa, and we have seen that
ladies and gentlemen,
we have seen that a lot has happened on this continent that has either driven us ahead of our time
of the media,
or time has kept us behind our times. But this is the clip we are waiting for of the concession speech of the presidential candidate who lost to the winner of the elections in Ghana. So let's listen to it, then we continue from there.
Following yesterday's presidential and parliamentary elections, Ghanaians at home and abroad have been sitting on tenterhooks awaiting the outcome of the election. Let me say that the data from our own internal collation of the election results indicate that former President, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, has won the presidential election decisively. The NDC has also won the parliamentary election, even though we await final collation for a number of seats. However, I believe ultimately that these will not change the overall outcome. I have just called His Excellency John Dramani Mahama to congratulate him as President-elect of the Republic of Ghana. I said during the signing of the Peace Pact that I was sure of two things: Ghana will win and peace will reign. The people of Ghana have spoken. The people have voted for change at this time, and we respect that decision with all humility. I thank God Almighty for how far He has brought me, and I submit to His will. I am making this concession speech before the official announcement by the Electoral Commission to avoid further tension and preserve the peace of our country. It is important that the world investor community continues to believe in the peaceful and democratic character of Ghana. These are our most important assets. Ghana is more important.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Now, that is the concession speech, and I brought in this particular speech because I want to prove to those who are critical about the African democracy, saying that elections are only to bring us chaos. We have seen this gentleman who was a former vice president and then now a former presidential candidate who was contesting as a presidential candidate in Ghana, and after losing, he did not even wait to see the election, the Electoral Commission announce the results. Well, I'm saying this because I have two gentlemen out there on the screen who are also members of a political party, and we are trying to discuss, can this happen in Uganda? Can this happen in other parts of Africa? Is it possible that Africa we can move further than this? And to have that discussion on, I'll begin with Ndugu Awich, who apparently was on the screen before we brought in that clip. Ndugu Awich, can we see this replicated in other parts of Africa, including Uganda?
For example, there's a very fundamental provision in the Constitution which provides that power belongs to the people. And that provision was not put there to be idle and redundant. And I like to share this with the viewers that there are some provisions we take for granted. For example, power belongs to the people. In the same constitution, it says land belongs to the citizens. Sometimes we read in passing and we think it means the same thing. Power belongs to the people, land belongs to the citizens. The provision for the land is that you don't give land anyhow, otherwise Chinese or Singaporeans would come and buy all the land if you give all the ownership, not to ordinary people, but not to citizens. But let me go back to democracy. Power belongs to the people here means that we submit to the will of the people. And President Museveni has always been saying that I am around here if you say I've stayed for long, not because of my will, but because the people want me. And in the case of President Museveni, the people wanting him is in two levels. The first level is that NRM will want you to be their flag bearer. And we know our constitutional provisions, starting with SEC.
Yeah.
The second thing is the people will want him at the voting level. And that is why President Museveni insisted during Corona. Some people were saying, no, we can do away with this. There's a state of emergency, there's sickness, we have disease, epidemic. Museveni said, no, let people vote under whatever circumstance. Therefore, this can happen, and President Museveni respects the will of the people, and that is why we continue. We are only President Museveni, as repeatedly said, is here because of the will of the people.
Sure.
Now, going to other countries, not only are we saying what has happened in Ghana can happen, but it has happened. For example, even in a tragic situation like Tanzania, we have had a situation where the president of Tanzania passes on, but there was a vice president who was a lady, and the vice president has taken over. Tanzania has moved on. Now, to our friends in the West, they don't highlight that. It is silent. They will only want a situation where there's crisis to make it look like we are not democratic. Otherwise, the event that took place in in Tanzania, that even in the death of a president, the vice takes over and there's peace, should have happened. We have also known a situation like in Kenya, where the current president was believed, though he was a vice president, but it was known that the relationship between him and this president, even when they were running mates, was not that smooth. But the Kenyans accepted and we moved on. So the examples are many. So it is not strange that whatever has happened to Ghana, by the loser are conceding, cannot happen anywhere. In the case of Uganda, we have insisted that that Article 1 is not an idle and a redundant provision. Okay. President Museveni is around because of that. So this can happen. The difference that I would like to highlight is that the issue is in Africa, being doubted by Western, is not the ability to change leadership. We have had a debate, and maybe we'll do it another time, in the form of democracy. For example, when President Museveni said that African democracy can be through a movement system, which we struggle until we put it in the constitution, that there are forms of democracy like multi-party democracy and a movement system of democracy. Only that in our Ugandan case, we said that if one is in place, the other one is in abeyance. For example, now we have the multi-party, then the movement is in abeyance. Colleagues, it's not really, we are not being judged in the conceding of elections, the change of the leadership. We are actually, the contention was, what is the form of agreeable democracy? Okay. So it is at two levels, the form of agreeable democracy and the fact that we change leaders. Okay. But also, I conclude, how about the practice of democracy itself? Do the West allow us or see us that we should practice? And the similarities between Ghana and Uganda, because you have mental. Okay. The world say now that you have parliament, do what you want. Remember, Ghana is the only second African country which has passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act. Yes. And they are really being put on a microscope, just like Uganda is on a microscope. So I like to bring that similarity, that when we say Africans are democratic, are you allowed to do that democracy? For example, even if you have a part bill, I'm saying nearly 99% of the bills introduced in parliament by government, opposition will oppose it because they know it is their work. But how about a bill like the anti-homosexuality bill, where all of a sudden all parties are agreeing, but somebody says, no, you don't do that. Is that democracy? Now, Ghana and Uganda is passing through the same. You have a bill which is bipartisan, agreeable by all parties, but somebody says, no, we don't want it. So that is the democracy that we are talking about. Okay. Now, Ndugu Otuko, if you're online, we want your take on that before we move to the next thing.
Thank you very much, Comrade James again.
Yeah.
I think a conversation when I was in the studio with the comrade, senior comrade Rugarama, I did make an indicative conversation on the nature of democracy in Africa. And I want to repeat and say that there is no democracy one size fit it all. Historically, Africa before colonization had its own form of democracy through which they were able to come up with leaders. There was a consensus, and these were all processes geared towards nurturing and selecting or putting leaders in place. When the Western democracy came, of course, they told us we were not democratic because we were not practicing their form of democracy. And yet, in actual sense, Africa had already formed its own form of democracy through which they were able to leaders. The West, of course, wanted us to follow their democracy. And I believe that's where we are now. We were overpowered. The president always says that the African leaders were not serious because at that time, the strangers came onto our land and they were looking on. They came, collaborated with some of our people, destroyed our value system in terms of democracy, and we were now migrated into the current form of democracy. Now, looking at the current form of democracy, indeed, this is an alien kind of practice which the West had practiced for over 100 years. And they expected us to catch up with them. We were young in terms of democracy as an African continent. Most of these countries in Africa have not elected for more than 50 years. And they expect us to behave like them who have been electing for over 300 years. And I think that is where the problem comes from. Africa still has a growing democracy. When you look at the Africa from the south, north, east, and west, you realize that there is tremendous progress in line with the Western democracy that we are practicing today. When you look at, for example, a country like Ghana, Liberia, Algeria, Tanzania, Senegal, Malawi, and others, including Uganda, there is tremendous amount of progress that these countries have made. Of course, when you look at Tanzania, that Comrade Dawich Pola Sr. was giving as an example, the president dies and there is no chaos, the succession is done, and the country continues normally, but the West cannot talk about it as an achievement in the African continent. When you go to Malawi, the president died in power, and there was succession, and there was no problem in that country. In Liberia, a sitting president lost, and he was able to concede, accept defeat, and so on and so forth. The comrade that you're talking about, the senior Pan-Africans, John Dramani Mahama, lost an election when he was a sitting president, and he was the first president in Ghana, a first sitting president, not to win a second term in the history of Ghana. And I think his discipline, his character showed that Africa was progressing to a certain direction, irrespective of this imposed democracy that we are practicing from the West. So in brief, I want to say that the African continent is poised for a better future, and as a continent, I am very confident that we are moving to the right direction. To come home in Uganda, of course, the reason why people think that maybe we are not so much democratic from the opposition or from those that are critical about us in government, is that for them they think changing presidents is democracy. In actual sense, it is not. The most important thing is the practice.
Sure.
We have been able to give people liberty to elect leaders, the youth, the women, the PWDs. We, at all levels, the level of democratization in Uganda is beyond the normal levels. In fact, actually, too much democratization that has been brought by NRM is becoming a problem, because development is being hampered by the so-called elected leaders, because you have to consult with them. So in my view, as a country, we are progressing to the right direction. On the day when Ugandans, in line with Article 1 of the Ugandan Constitution, say that President Museveni and NRM are no longer worthy to be in power or to be in leadership, and they want alternative, maybe political authority, then I believe NRM will be able to concede power, concede defeat in the event that it is fairly defeated in a democratic process. Now, the challenge that we have in the multi-party democracy today in Africa is that we are using democratic political parties as organizations for championing the neo-colonial agenda. I remember in the last conversation we had, I stated that the problem of our political parties is that they do not have homegrown values that are for the interest of the African people. You find that a political organization is formed in Uganda, but these are people who are advancing the values of political parties in the West. I remember giving an example that once somebody has formed a political party, the first country the first continent he will run is in the West. They will go and make presentations to the funders in the West. Why? Because they will have to be the puppets. Even if they came into power, they will have to advance the interests of those that are funding them. Unless and until Africa or Africans are able to develop their own political parties, their own political values, and they are also able to have their own economic power, so that they are able to raise money from their maybe investments, businesses, and so on and so forth, locally in Africa here, then we shall have better political parties that will serve the interests of the people. But for now, we are using political parties as vehicles of advancing the neo-colonial agenda in Africa.
Okay, thank you so much, Ndugu Otuko, who apparently is in Iganga, and we know there's a lot that you are doing there in terms of cleaning and digitizing the movement, NRM register, and of course maybe it's one of those activities that will at the end of it usher in leaders who will be respected, because there will be no problems in elections. And we're talking about this because we want leaders, when they come to power, to come through the cleaner ways, and how, so that if for example we're talking about Ghana, if there were issues with the elections, someone wouldn't have come out to say, look, I've conceded because there's no way we can win this election. We do that when a person knows that all avenues have been exhausted and the register was clean and the activity that brought the leader on the win clear. Now, Ndugu Awich Enigulu, we are looking at how Africa is progressing in terms of democratic development, and we have seen, of course, countries in Africa that have been able to stand to that, even if it were a test, to show that definitely Africa can do their things, Africans can do things differently but still yield results. Now, from your perspective, as you are in Gulu, looking at how, in most cases we have been talking about, we cannot do this because someone, the West, does not allow us to do that. We cannot, can we at some point as Africans be able to do our own things without having the fear of the West, that the West has to do this. West, of course, it is true we are not going to run away from the West because we are partners in a number of things, but can we also do things that the West will be able to respect us without having to police us to tell us what to do?
Yes, we are able to do it, and maybe that is one way of showing our development partners from the West that we can do it, so that we don't need pressure. It is one way of fighting the pressure, not by resistance, by our ability to show that we are clean. For example, I think in the case of Uganda, the idea that you form your political party and briefcase as it may to be a source of raising money for yourself, it has been tried to be addressed in two ways. One is that there is a law which now prescribes methods of funding like from abroad. So if you do that, you'd be committing a crime. However, not only do you take punitive measures, there is also a way to fund political parties so that you lessen the appetite of going for money abroad. And that is why a parliament appropriates money from the consolidated fund and it gives money to political parties. However, this is only being given to parties which have shown seriousness to win membership in parliament. And even, I was talking to some colleagues from abroad, and even the colleagues like in the NUP, they didn't know that actually NUP gets money from government in billions from the money given through parties who have representation in parliament. So the idea here is not only should we take a punitive measure by criminalizing how or you should not get or what amount of money you get from abroad, but also give the money to make them lessen their appetite. So this is one democratic principle that we should prove that we can do it ourselves, we can fund our parties, we can, with this funding, our parties can grow. Because if you get even a mere 2 billion, it is enough for you to reach out to your people in the country. It is the money Honorable Bobi Wine uses to move around the country to talk to his people or even to fly abroad. But the other thing also is that we should show that democracy, in a sense of respecting the people's will, we are doing it. So if we show that we are respecting the people's will, maybe it's a way of making our friends in the West to say, leave us alone. For example, in the case of President Museveni, even in NRM, he has insisted that please give the party flags to the person who deserves it. If you go for an election, for example, where Ruth Nankabirwa is contesting with the other lady whom she contested with, between the two, whoever wins, give the flag to the right person. Now, similarly, not only should we be seen to accepting the will of the people at a parliamentary level, like my comrade Tuku said, even at presidential, we should show it.
Okay.
So all these are factors that show that we are being democratic. And eventually our friends who want to teach us will find they have little and little and little to teach us about.
Sure.
So we should not just be saying, don't teach us, don't interfere. We should also be showing that democracy is accepting the will of the people, and therefore we are respecting. Also, democracy is involvement of the people. Do you involve the women? Do you involve the youth? Do you involve this? I know there are statistics which are done to evaluate countries' acceptance of, say, women participation. They have a yardstick. So what is our ranking?
Okay.
There's a yardstick.
Okay.
There.
Okay.
So we should not only guard from being interfered with, but we should do things which lessen the interest of interference.
Exactly. Ndugu Otuko, on your parting shot on that, can we stand alone without people telling us what to do? And if we were to do so, what do we need to do?
As long as we have the heart to develop Africa, to progress Africa to the next level, I believe we can be able to stand alone.
Okay.
But as I've always said, that economically, Africa must sort out itself, because the West and the world outside there is using money to manipulate African continent. Unless and until we resolve the issue of industrialization, the issue of the economies of the African countries, the issue of investments, the issue of interlinkages, so that we can be able to increase the African GDP, we shall continue begging, and we shall continue having people who are running to the West to manipulate Africa.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ndugu Tuko Andy Ndugu Awich from Gulu. You can give us your closing remarks, and we shall close this episode of the program.
My closing remark is that democracy, and you can remove the word, you can even wrap the word democracy, but we are saying the will of the people must be respected. It is only that when we enter into a social contract that the people give us leadership, their will is respected, that there is peace. So we should do every ingredient to ensure that it is done. And when the will of the people is respected, it is reflected in our livelihoods. There's peace, there's food on the table, there's health, there is education. You know, the society runs harmoniously. So not only is it a theoretical thing, but the practicality is that the will of people is reflected in our daily livelihoods, in the happiness that we have. Whether you measure happiness in a happiness-ogram or happiness-ogram, once the will of the people is respected, it is reflected in our daily happiness. And we should strive for that.
Thank you so much, Ndugu Awich. You have some 2 more minutes to conclude on that, but I will also ask you, because I know there's a lot that is happening in Gulu. People had known Gulu in the past as the town for NGOs when they flocked there, but I think life has changed, and I'm told there is a lot of new things that are happening in Gulu, and I wish you the best in Gulu. And in Ndugu Otuko, I can see you are enjoying your cup of tea in Iganga, and we also wish you the best in Iganga. But until next week, when we shall again meet on this program of Pan-African. Apparently, we have not been able to link up with the Ndugu Rugarama. He must be in town running between the corridors of court, sorting out some of the legal issues of his clients. I'm sure we'll be linking up with him in the coming week. So, gentlemen, I wish you the best in the countryside as you mobilize for the digitalization of the NRM register, but also as you cross-crease the country with the good network of the road, so that when you come back in Kampala, you can enjoy some of our pumps. Until then, we'll be in touch, and I wish you the best of the weekend, and also our viewers the best of the weekend. Until we meet next week again, have the best of the weekend and have a blessed one. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Good Morning Uganda, your go-to morning show to kickstart your day with all the latest updates.
Let's dive deep into issues that matter most to you.
In a world of stories waiting to be told, the headlines are your guide. Navigate the currents of news and knowledge with our daily updates of newspapers. Stay informed, stay empowered.
From the roar of the crowd to the thunder of victory, witness the drama unfold with our sports updates. Whether on the field or in the stands, join us as we celebrate the spirit of champions.
Rise with Good Morning Uganda, weekdays from 6:30 a.m. Pick of the day on UBC.
One-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa.
A weekly face-to-face conversation focusing on accountability, inspiration, information, and sensitization of the